We do get asked a lot, specifically about the photography side of things, how the local people respond to being photographed. And so we were thinking, well, this could make an interesting discussion as to why we actually even include photography in our vlogs.
If you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to get this added bonus at the end of Jamie's little work of art.
Hello, I'm Liz.
And I'm Jamie.
Welcome to Follow the Boat, in which we discuss what it's really like to give it all up to live on a boat.
And go travelling around the world. We've been doing it since 2006 and we're still at it.
Each week we talk about our latest YouTube videos.
And about boats, sailing, travel or anything else which floats into our heads.
And if you leave a comment we like, we'll give you an answer and a name check. Peace and fair winds.
Hello once more. And firstly, my apologies. I probably look really tired, a bit paranoid here. But we had a bit of an issue last night, didn't we, Elizabeth?
Yeah, so it was morning for me. It was the middle of the night for you, but I got onto the boat because you may be able to hear a slight difference in the way I'm sounding. And if you're watching, you'll see that obviously I'm not on the boat. And I'm not on the boat because so much going on inside. I'm staying in a room in the hotel. So what I'm doing is get up, have a breakfast, and I go onto the boat. Got on the boat this morning and put the fans on, nothing happened. And then went round the boat and all the sockets were out. So I couldn't plug anything in, couldn't make a cup of tea, couldn't do nothing. So 9 o'clock here is 1 o'clock in the morning there. So I spent half an hour flicking switches and going around and wondering what to do. And eventually I gave up, sent some help messages to you because it's electrical and I'm always worried about electrical things.
Yeah, I just happened to be awake at the time, but I didn't get to sleep until 3:30 this morning. And then, of course, had to get up to be ready at 9 to do this podcast so we could catch the light at both ends of our respective locations. So yes, I haven't had much sleep, so I apologise. Anyway, we've got the inverter working again, which is a good thing, but we're going to get an electrician to just pop up who's seen the inverter before and knows a thing or two about them to maybe just have a look at it with you. So this is one of the problems with being so remote from each other. And as you can see, if you are watching this, I am still in the UK. So apologies for that.
You were supposed to have been back by now, but things took a little bit longer than we thought, didn't they?
Yes. But I'm glad to hear that things are progressing on the boat, as they are back in the UK for me. So all is not lost. We're still getting stuff done, which is great.
Yeah. Yes, we are. And so when you get back, there'll be a few more things to finish up that require your presence. And then it would be very nice to get back in the water. I'm absolutely fed up with being on land, on a boat on land. She gets so hot. I moan about it every week, but there you go. Anyway, it's a bit cooler now here because I have not only air conditioning, but I have hot water showers as well. Absolute luxury.
That is a luxury, isn't it? Yeah, nice. Well, it's getting colder and colder by the day here.
Yes.
Not for, I have to say, not for the people that live here who are quite used to this weather, but of course, having spent so many years in the tropics, it does take me that much longer to reacclimatise to the UK climate. And I'm not doing too badly. I'm coping, but as you can see, I've still got layers on.
Yes, so. I did tell you to take some thermals, but you'll never learn, will you? Right, so this week's podcast then. Quite interesting, isn't it? I wrote down the quote that we got. It was on our Discord community, wasn't it?
Yeah, this is from Lundo Bali, isn't it? Who regularly comments and has started watching us since we've moved to Indonesia because they're based in Indo themselves. So they're fascinated by what's going on. But the question that they had was much more general, wasn't it?
Yes, it sort of sparked some ideas in our head. So they did ask us quite a lot of questions, which we have covered elsewhere, and I was able to point them in the right direction. And but this sentence really made me sit up and think. It was it easy for you to start talking to strangers, or did it take time to get to your current ease? And if you're a regular viewer, you'll know that we spend a lot of time photographing, videoing and spending hours walking and just generally time with local people.
It's a big side to what we do, definitely. And with talking to local people comes filming and photographing local people. And this is where Lundo Bali went on to ask about how comfortable we are with photographing and filming people.
And it got us... Sorry, go on.
I think we're about to say the same thing. It got us thinking, well, this could be an interesting one, because we do get asked a lot, specifically about the photography side of things, how the local people respond to being photographed. And so we were thinking, well, this could make an interesting discussion as to why we actually even include photography in our vlogs, and vlog being the operative word, because that means a video log. So it's quite a change to be putting more and more still photography into our vlogs. And it's not something that we see that often, is it?
No, it's not. So there's two things that we do that perhaps not so many other tubers do, which is one, talk to the local people, interview them, get them on camera. We're not filming ourselves diving and prattling around. We're more interested in the people that we meet. And secondly, we've started to put more and more actually images into our videos, and it all comes about because of your passion, interest and ability in photography. You've been taking photographs for a long time, and you're a member of the Royal Photographic Society? What is it? Society, yeah. So, I mean, you've been studying and dealing in images, in images rather than video, for a very long time. Video only came in secondary. And it really is, would you say it's your real passion?
Absolutely, yes. And it's something I realised I'd neglected over the last few years with doing the whole YouTube channel, is that I was concentrating so much on the video side of things. And I think one of my frustrations is that in my head with video, I have great ideas, but I'm finding the execution quite difficult simply because of the time constraints. We put out a video, or we put out our travel log episodes every other week now, which has allowed me to buy some more time. But from a cinematographic point of view, the framing, the lighting, all that kind of things, I think they're heavily compromised when we do video, because we are restricted by time and location. And quite often we are recording when perhaps it's an overcast day, it could be in the midday sun, in conditions that aren't ideal for either photography or videography. And so quite often when I put an episode out, I'm always a little bit frustrated at it not being how I saw it in my head.
Because with the photography, you were always able to go, find somewhere and then go back and spend some time there. Or even if it's something that we'd only knew we wouldn't be able to go back to, we could spend hours there and wait for the light to change and wait for the conditions to be right and chat to people. So going back to people, we were able to put them at their ease to a certain extent. And I think you obviously started it first because of your street photography, but I soon warmed to it with you. And it's become a big part of our travel. Because you wanted to do the portraiture and general street photography, we ended up talking to people a lot more than we perhaps might have.
Yes, and I guess also maybe people respond better to a quick lift up of the camera to take a photo rather than holding a video camera in their face. There may be something in that. And also, I think my methodology or my approach while doing both video and photography is different. As I said, there's this constraint of having to be filming in order to put something out. So the pressure is already there to put this out because I know I've got to put a video out this week. With photography, the approach is, or the methodology is very different. The photography is purely for me. And so that does allow me to be more relaxed, maybe a bit more thoughtful in what I'm producing. And when you slow down and do the photography, that suddenly makes you more approachable and more relaxed approaching local people, because you've got, you slow down, you've got time to chat to them, to eke out the locations or the people to photograph. Whereas with video, I always feel like it's like, quick film this, quick film that, got to get a bit of B-roll, got to get this shot here for the, for an end game, for something to produce at the end of it. And I think that's...
Yeah, sorry. All I was going to say is that what you're saying is it's almost formulaic, isn't it? Oh, got to get the B-roll, got to get this shot, got to get that shot. Here's another sunset, here's blah, blah, blah. It's same old. And it's like, obviously, some of those things are great and they're really important. But I think that's where video comes in, because you don't really do that with the camera. With the camera, you want to concentrate on the subject. And I think generally that your people photography is way better than the video of people. So that's where the camera really comes into its own, don't you think, on the whole? Not always. Yes. Obviously, there's some great landscapes as well. But
yeah, definitely. And I think a picture really does speak 1,000 words, spell 1,000 words. What's the expression? A picture tells 1,000 words.
Speaks, I think.
Speaks, yes.
Picture
because,
speaks 1,000.
You have one frame in which to tell a story. And believe me, there are many thousands of photographs that you don't get to see because, as a photographer, you take many photos and then you go back and you edit them and you pare them down, and maybe, let's say, out of 100 photographs, maybe 5, possibly 10 are keepers, which truly tell a story. And I think that's the great thing about photography, is that with just one image, you can tell so many stories. More importantly, I think the viewer can interpret a single frame in so many different ways.
Yes, a face can say so much to you. Expressions can look very different to people, which is why I love portraiture. So there's two things here. There's street photography, which is one thing which you could perhaps explain to people, and then there's portraiture, and you do both of those things, I think, generally. Sometimes they're easier in some places than in others. There's not so much to say here. I've got questions, but you're obviously the one that needs to do the answering. So would you agree that it's part street, part portraiture that you're doing?
Yes, and even then you can break it down further, because the portraiture I do is street portraiture. So obviously it's not using studio lights, it's using available light, and quite often my portraits are taken without permission from that person. I talked about this briefly in one of our recent videos when we walked around Beamer. And so, if you look at some street portraiture, all they're doing is going around finding interesting people, stopping them, saying, "Can you pose for me to take a photo?" And then they interact and they can get and they can get good portraits. But even my street portraiture tends to be uncontrolled, I suppose. But I guess, yes, we should just very quickly explain what street photography is. I mean, it's hugely contentious. And when you're in the photography world, this gets debated to death. What is street photography? And first of all, the terminology is a bit misleading, because you think, well, it's photographs taken in the street, and it isn't. Certainly from my perspective, I've seen street photography of landscapes and countryside. But essentially, for those who don't know, perhaps the biggest proponent and the most famous photographer of street photography was Henri Bresson. And he actually set up the Magnum Society, the famous photography society. So it was he who set that up. And he used this term, the decisive moment. Now, I'm sure all photographers out there will have heard this, and they will probably have heard even this debated to death. But the decisive moment is that one frame that tells the story better than the frames that came before it or after it. And it's the street photographer's ability to capture that decisive moment. quite often street photography can be taken to its extreme and capturing a decisive moment that is almost bizarre looking in, when you look at the one frame, you think that stage, that set up, how did they get that photo? That, that's incredible, that to have got that one decisive moment. The reactions of a street photographer quite often have to be ninja-like because you're trying to get that decisive moment.
Sorry for interrupting, but while I've got you here, if you like what we do and you want to support us and become a Patreon or join us on FTB Mates or even drop a quid in the rum fund, go to followtheboat.com/pub. Of course, come to the pub.
The other thing is putting yourself in the right place at the right time. There's a good friend of yours who he would spend all day on one particular corner waiting for that right moment. He wouldn't take any photos and he knew what he was looking for and then he'd get it. So it's not always just run and gun or whatever it's called.
Yeah, I mean, that's just one technique. And then, if you go on Instagram and you look up street photography, you'll see a lot of black and white, heavily contrasty, shadows highlight, angles. They've almost become a bit of a cliche now, but all you have to think is decisive moments and not necessarily taken on a street. So it is quite a broad photographic style. But of course, a lot of my photography kind of borders on travel photography because travel photography is all about a sense of place. That's how the Royal Photographic Society defines travel photography, a sense of place. So within your one frame and within your story, you're saying, here's the person, but here's the environment in which they're operating in. And so you can get travel street photography, and perhaps the most famous person of that is Steve McCurry, the person who took the Afghan girl that appeared on National Geographic. When you look at some of his shots of India, they are definitely travel photos, but they are also street because he's capturing that decisive moment.
He was one of the first really to really understand and get the light and the colours in India, and he spawned a million copycats. But also not just copycats, but he's inspired people to go to India and see what an extraordinary place it was. And of course, we had 3 years there, and you used to take street walks with local photographers, didn't you? You used to go on photo walks together with them.
That's right. Yeah, befriended a whole bunch of photographers down in Kerala, and we used to go for photo walks at the weekend, which was great fun and also a good way of getting to know the local photographers in that scene. I was going to say it was quite difficult to get good street photography when there's a group of 15 of you walking around in a group. But actually, India was a very good place where you're ignored. And I think as a street photographer, that's what you want. You want to be ignored. You don't want to be seen because it's not a rule, but one thing that's hotly debated is should the subject be looking at the camera? And perhaps 80% of the time, no, you don't want them looking at the camera. But some great street photography is where the subject is looking directly at the camera. And again, is telling a story that is so engaging because you're mesmerised by locking eyes with the subject.
Yes, it's very interesting. So what we need to do now is we need to take some of your principles of images and photography and how you apply them to videography. So I think people would be interested to know what you try to do with a video camera when you're not using your stills camera.
I'd say with videography, maybe the rules I keep saying rules, it's the same with anything. With photography, learn the rules and then learn how to break them. So definitely don't take my word literally. But when thinking of videography, it's maybe maybe it's a bit more akin to landscape photography, where you are following some basic principles like lighting. The best time of day to be shooting, they say, is first thing in the morning and towards sunset, the golden hour. But I contest that because I think sometimes the midday sun can also produce some great, both photography and video. But also to think about the framing, you know, the idea of this rule of thirds, you know, dividing your screen up into a grid of 9 blocks and then getting your subject to fall on one of those lines, you know, those kind of principles as well. But I think it's also, with vlogging, it is a bit more like run and gun documentary making, and that's where those kind of rules go out the window. And the thing you are concentrating on is the story. And if the story requires you to run down the street with a shaky camera to help tell the story, then so be it. And that's why some of those more creative rules go out the window, because actually what you're trying to do is to document something. And how many documentaries have we watched where it's shaky camera work and bad lighting?
Yeah. The sound may not be perfect. Yeah, and but yes, it's telling a story. You might have voiceovers that bring it all together. So quite a lot of the time, you have a sort of a mixed bag of stills and videography, of talking to local people, talking to each other, talking to camera at the time, and then talking about it afterwards in studio or on the boat rather. And then that's why videography is different, because you are using all of those elements to tell a story. And you're pulling them all together to try and come up with something that has some meaning. Whereas with photography, it's one image and that will have that meaning. It may be part of a set, but it's all there in the one image. So why have we started putting a lot more of your stills into our videos? People, I think, seem to like it. What is it? Why is it you're doing it?
Well, that's the reason, because people like it. I think there's 2 reasons, really. The first is, as I was saying, I felt that I was neglecting my photography side of my passion. So I wanted to go back and do more photography. But as you say, what we found was, we did a little experiment. I think I put in 10 photos in one episode. And the feedback we got from that was very positive. And interestingly, you know, from a YouTubing point of view, quite a few people said, no one else is doing this, you know, taking a break and just having a photo montage. So we took those ideas on board and said, okay, well, this is great, because it means I can do more photography and put them in our videos, which is wonderful. And, you know, I don't really use social media anymore for my photography, but it is always nice to get positive feedback. So that helps as well, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. People have reacted pretty well to the images. It's absolutely, yes, they have. But I think that's all great. But I think we took a conscious decision, didn't we, that you were going to do more photography, go back to your roots and include them in our videos to be authentic, to be ourselves, because this is what we do. You like to go around with a camera and take lots of stills. And I sometimes will video you as you're doing it, or do a bit of talking to camera, because, you know, I can run around with a GoPro and talk to camera. I think it's quite interesting watching. This is something you didn't talk about in great detail, but I'd like to go back to it. So I'm sometimes videoing you while you're filming, while you're taking photos of people. And it's really interesting watching their reactions from the other side. And I like to get their reactions in as well. So we've been in Southeast Asia for 10 years and we were in India for 3 years. And I would say generally the response here and there has been quite similar, in that most people love you to turn up with a camera. Don't you agree?
Yes. And again, I think I mentioned this in our recent video in Beamer, where they can't help themselves.
Yeah.
They have to pull the peace sign and a silly face.
Yeah. You have to let them get through that.
Yes. Well, I did say in that video that I try and get the uninvited photo first before you go through all that, because once you've got that engagement with them, obviously everything changes. The whole dynamic changes. So I think it's important to try and get that decisive moment first. Because it's very difficult to get that decisive moment afterwards. But on the whole, yes, we've found that doing street photography is, apart from the technical problems, i.e. being spotted with a camera and then reacting in that way. Apart from that, they're very comfortable with being photographed and they don't have a problem with it. And it does help that, of course, we're clearly tourists as well.
Yes.
So we're not threatening. I think it's, you look at a lot of street photography, certainly that gets posted on Instagram, it's much more that distant street photography or maybe a passing crowd, but you don't see as much of the full confrontational, in-your-face kind of stuff. Yeah. It's not for any legal reasons, but I think we just know in the West we respond less well to a stranger coming up and photographing us.
Can you just go through that? Because I think people need to understand about taking photographs of each other out in the open. Can you explain the legal side of it?
Generally, and this does apply in most countries, if you're in a public place, you are allowed to take photographs. No one can stop you from taking photographs when you're in a public place. Hence, if you're in the street, everything's legal. You could be taking a photograph of a private building, but if you're standing in the street, if that security guard comes out and tells you not to photograph the building he's being the guard for, he has no right to do that. You can take a photo. And obviously some photographers push that luxury of doing that by getting in your face with people, and, you know, were they to be confronted with that, they just turn around and say, well, you know, I've got every right to do that. Most photographers don't. Most photographers are very, gentle people who will normally say, don't worry, I'll delete it. I'll delete it for you. If that were to happen. But we don't find that in Asia. We have had a few issues. I remember in India, we were in a train station and I actually ended up in the chief guard's office. Not because I was arrested, but I wanted to know why I wasn't allowed to take photographs in a train station. And this actually relates back to the Mumbai bombings of 2008. And I think they actually passed a law which said photography would not be allowed in those kind of public places. So there are always exceptions to the rule. But on the whole, yeah, you're free to take pictures of whatever you want.
So can you take a photograph of a person out in the street and then publish it and get paid for it without them? Yeah. So I think people need to understand that.
Well, hold on. So normally if it's for commercial reasons, you need the consent of your subject.
Right. So when you say commercial reasons, what's that?
So if you're using it in a billboard advert, for example.
Right. Yes. So not as an exhibit in a museum or a gallery.
No. No. As far as I know, no, you don't. No, yes. It's normally for commercial purposes, and commercial in the commercial sense. And I don't know where, that would fall in. When I think of the exhibitions that I've seen and the street photographies, the famous street photographies, they're full of strangers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's perhaps a grey area, but if you're taking, you just say you're taking photos for yourself.
Yeah.
Essentially, you are. And then if it happens to end up in a set of 10 or 15 exhibited photos later on, I don't think that's a problem.
No, I don't think it is. But as you say, if you're selling it for a commercial, that's the obvious one. But there's going to be lots of grades in between. So street photography back home in the UK, a little different, would you say? I mean, you've had more negative experiences in the West, I think. Am I right, or is that wrong?
Yes, I mean I remember one particular confrontation I had, which was down in Rye, in your mum's hometown, a sleepy market coastal town, and had a confrontation with a woman because I was taking photos, it turned out, of her teenage son who happened to be sitting on a park bench. And of course, I'm so used to taking pictures of teenagers, children, old people, didn't matter. Maybe didn't think about it. So, so she had a big go at me, and I assured her. To be honest, her reaction was absolutely, it was ridiculous.
But mainly when people say they don't want it, you just don't take the photo. I mean, occasionally over here,
Just walk on.
yes, quite often women don't want to have a photograph taken, but perhaps for religious reasons, customs, I don't know. Sometimes they definitely don't, and it's absolutely fine. They just turn their heads away and put their hand across, and then you just say, yeah, no problem.
Sometimes they'll just do this. They'll say no photo. And in which case, it's fine. You nod and smile and just walk on, because there'll be another photo to take around the corner. Now, what is interesting, and I'd love to do a video on particular photos that people have commented on, where the viewer has interpreted that single frame as confrontational because of the expression captured on the face.
Yes.
Quite often, those photographs will be a series of before and after photographs, and I happen to select, say, the middle frame, but there'll be 5 before and 5 after. 5 before where it may show her turning around to look at camera, and then the 5 after where, after the shock and surprise, she bursts into a huge smile and then does the peace sign. And of course, those pictures are a little bit more, for me, they're a bit more cliche perhaps. So I'm looking for the photo that's super engaging and gets the viewer to question it. So quite often, the photos that we end up showing in our videos can be interpreted in many different ways, and sometimes people interpret it the wrong way, I think the wrong way, by saying, you can clearly see this person is upset. I can think of one I haven't yet shown, actually, because I took it in Labuan Bajo, which we're going to be visiting very soon in our videos.
Yeah.
And it's a super photo because I was using flash at the time, and she was wearing a yellow jumpsuit. She was a street cleaner, and she just looked incredible. And I got this photo with the flash gun, and the look on her face is just of, who knows, shock, surprise, horror, whatever, however you interpret it. The fact is, after that photo, I then stopped, chatted to her, showed her the frame. She loved it. She laughed. You don't see all that in that single frame. And that's why when people write comments like that, you're being inconsiderate, I don't really respond to it, because I know that, no, I wasn't. And the interaction I had with that person proves otherwise.
And it is such a great way to get to know people, because we're always going on about wanting to understand the culture a bit better, and you do that by talking to people, and it's a perfect entrance into it. As you say, you take the photo, you get chatting, you sit down and chat to a number of people around you. When we were on Sumbawa, we ended up sitting with Diana on her veranda for hours, and we've still got her on WhatsApp with people over the world. We've got on WhatsApp and back and forth. She helped set up that whole thing you did on the Bagan, doing the night fishing and all that sort of thing. So, just to go back to Londa Bali's original question about how easy is it to get to know people, it's photography is a really great way of doing it. Without being intrusive, you can break down barriers very, very quickly and very easily, particularly here, because everybody wants to know you anyway. Everyone's so friendly in Indonesia.
Yeah, it's definitely something that almost bothers me. If we move on to different cultures, let's say Japan, I know for a fact that in Japan, I think street photography is more difficult and there are more legal implications. Plus, they're a much more reserved race generally. I do know some great Japanese street photographers, and also for street photographers from the West who've got some great photos from Japan. But I know, as an example, that's a place where the kind of photography I'm doing in Asia, in Southeast Asia, would be difficult to do in East Asia, and even more so, in the West, let's say. That's a concern of mine. I may have to move over to bird photography or something instead.
But those in the very latest one, we'll put a link at the top of the screen somewhere if you're watching this. And the very latest one, which is all based in Pulau Banta, just before we got to Komodo, you did a lot of drone footage of the crater, because we were anchored inside a spectacular volcano. It's the deserted island. If you haven't seen it, watch it, it's amazing. But then staggered along with the videos taken from the drone, you did some single images taken from the drone as well. And for me, I like those better than the video. I thought they were stunning.
Yes, those tend to be. I tend to do a lot of panoramics from the drone, which are 9 stitched photos, so they are very spatial. And the drone photography is an interesting one. I posted up a photo when I first got my drone. I posted up a photo on, it was either Instagram or Twitter, and I wrote drone street photography. You saw it here first. And it was a photo looking directly down at this great image of a couple sitting at a table and chair by the shore with this umbrella and the waves breaking. And anyway, it was a great photo, even if I say so myself. And drone photography is an interesting one where actually you tend to find, especially if you're shooting straight down, it's actually better to take photos in the middle of the day because you've got the sun pointing straight down. You don't have the problems with shadows that you get when you're shooting horizontally with a camera on land. There are competitions for drone photography. It's definitely an established medium, a style of photography, and I think it's great that that exists. I tend to just do it just for, the documentary for our videos, really. Just makes a little change from the video itself.
Yeah, and you want to shake it up, don't you? You want some different perspectives and angles, and you want the stills in there and the movement. And so what do we call this? We called this the importance of photography and video. So I think what we've tried to say is that they each have their positives. They're each bringing something to the party, that the video tends to be the workhorse and the photography is the moments of beauty, usually. And so it's a great way of combining the two, putting it all into some kind of narrative and some kind of story.
It's almost like the video is saying, this is how we got here, and this is a sort of general overview, and then the photography is the sort of the dive in under the skin and saying, and these are the people that live here and this is their life. I suppose that's a very simple way of looking at it.
So you've talked a bit about how important it is to when you're filming, as you're thinking always as a photographer. But one of the questions that people do ask a lot is what equipment should you use? Is it something you're prepared to talk about now, or is it all rubbish?
Well, that's interesting because you could answer the question, you've probably heard this before, the best camera is the camera that you have on you. By the way, I could talk about this for hours, because it is my passion. So shut me up when I've talked too much about it. But yeah, obviously when we are doing our vlogging, I have to think about, okay, am I going to take the video camera and also the stills camera? And for me, with either travel or street photography, the smaller the better, really. It's just something that's super portable. And although I shoot with a full frame camera, mirrorless camera, it is very small. And I think certainly with street photography, you want to be as insignificant as possible. You don't want to be seen or spotted. And there's a lot to be said for marching around with a massive, great big full frame DSLR and a zoom lens, a great big zoom telephoto lens on it. That's not street photography in my book. That's stalking, when you're trying to get a shot. When you're getting a shot from way over there because you don't have the confidence to get up close and personal. My favourite photographer, street photographer, possibly of all time, is Bruce Gildan, who is an extremely divisive photographer because if you look at some of his early work, he really did get up close and personal. But I think it was he who coined the phrase that you need to smell the streets. Your photo needs to be so in the moment that you are taken there. And that's obviously very difficult to do with a whacking great big long telephoto lens taken from half a mile away. So in terms of gear, really the smaller the better. And, it just needs to be something that can turn on quickly and take that photo quickly if you're using autofocus to autofocus quickly. But you can take a picture with street photography, certainly, with any camera, to be honest. And the more gear you have, the more complex it becomes. Now you're carting around loads of stuff. And this goes back to our videoing as well, is that I'm trying to pare down our video equipment because we're moving around and traveling and carrying all this extra camera gear. It kills the creativity, I think, more than anything.
I remember the olden days when I used to hike a bloody great bits and pieces bag full of all your bloody lenses and, I don't know, everything.
It was in India.
Grudgingly.
Yes, I downsized in India because I found I was getting back problems. This is something that you hear a lot of from cameramen and women who work in the industry, having to cart all this heavy gear around. But even I was finding it with my Canon full frame, my Canon L lenses, these big heavy lenses. When you're traveling around and marching up and down mountains in the tropics, that is the last kind of camera gear you want to be taking with you. It's completely impractical. And then you get to your spot and you're all hot and sweaty and frustrated. And as I said, it completely kills the creativity, and you just want to sit down and have a cup of tea rather than, get into the streets, as it were.
Oh yeah, I remember those moments. It was me carting around the tripods as well. But getting away from straight photography and just stills, so with video, what do we use now? So I only use one camera, I use a GoPro. That's all I use at the moment. Although I believe that you're changing that for me when you come back. You've got something else for me. So
I'm not going to talk about it now because it's your Christmas present.
I've only ever wanted one camera at a time, and I want it to be a point and shoot and full friendly camera. I'm not interested in all the gizmos that you do, but a lot of the big stuff and all the different switches and bells and whistles that you used to have, you seem to have less and less of that now on the video equipment that you use.
Yeah, and I think it's partly an age thing. It's tiring carrying around all this gear all the time. And in fact, with our videos, what I'm tending to find is that when we get to a new location, I'll take the video gear with me first when we go ashore, get some B-roll. B-roll is just a name for not the main shots in a video, but the quick shot of, the mountain or the sea or whatever.
Setting the atmosphere, really, yeah.
Yes, exactly. So get all that with the video gear, and then, as you said earlier, is to maybe go back another day, having now got a bit familiar with the terrain, with the stills camera, but more often than not with the stills camera only, and to not take the video gear with me. And that allows me to focus purely on the photography and to not even have to think about the video side of things.
If you find this topic interesting and would like to continue the conversation, come and join the Follow the Boat Discord community. Look for the link in the description. It's free.
We mention Discord every week, but on our Discord server, we actually have a little photography section, which is just your photos, where people are just encouraged to post up any photo, just for the sake of having a gallery. But we actually have a separate camera chat channel. And so this is where us camera nerds talk about equipment. And so I would positively encourage anyone who's listening to this podcast who wants to talk more about gear, tips, ideas, that kind of thing, whether it's for video or for photography, to join our Discord server and try and find the camera chat channel, because that's where we talk all about this kind of stuff in more detail.
Yes, I'd like to reiterate that. It's a busy little corner of the Discord area, that is, full of enthusiasts. Everybody's encouraged to ask any question they like. Nobody will be bored of your question. I will not be participating because it bores me stupid, but Jamie loves it, and so do lots of our members. Everybody has an opinion and loads of interesting things to say, so that's a really good spot and a friendly place to go and talk about cameras and equipment. Well, yeah, it's good to see the photos.
We should just say, though, that you say all this, but we have actually just bought you a special lens for one of my cameras, along with a Lightbox Studio, because you are going to be taking some photos, which I'm really hoping will also appear in our videos. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yes, well, I have... my whole interest in shells and beachcombing has just skyrocketed over the last year. Since the end of COVID, I've been really looking at my shell collection. So I started picking up bits and pieces, not just shells, all kinds of things from the beach 15 years ago, really. And I've had a basket full of stuff. But recently, I've got much more interested in identifying shells. And to do that, you need to collect the shell and then photograph it with a macro lens very, very carefully, and then put it into specialist groups where they will help you to give you the identification. And just as an aside, one of the most interesting things and exciting things that has happened to me is that last week I found a shell that everybody believes is a new species. So, you know, for the real shell nerds, it's very exciting. But yeah, so we can go down the whole rabbit hole of should you collect shells. I do understand the whole thinking behind that. I do have one of everything that I've found, and I keep them labelled in boxes, and I have become a complete bore about the whole thing. But what I want to do is take better photographs, much clearer photographs, and because all I'm using is my potty little mobile phone at the moment. So I'm really interested to do some macro photography. And macro photography is something that really does interest me. All the insects and things and shells and this kind of thing. I'd love to be able to get some real close-up, crisp shots. So yeah, that's going to be my thing.
And we should just say that one of the reasons for photographing is that it's quite likely that you won't be able to keep those shells. So you want to document them now, just in case you end up putting them back on the beach. And the thing with, and we're getting a bit technical here, the problem with photographing shells is that they're so, on the whole, they're so small that when you take a picture with your camera, even if you use a very deep depth of field, so you close down your aperture, quite often only one part of the shell is in focus. You get that drop-off effect. And so the lens that we've bought you is specifically for macro photography, and you've even been learning about focus stacking. There we go. We won't talk about that now, but all I'm saying is that you say all this stuff bores you, Liz, but you know, there's a side of photography that you do really like, and you take great photos with your camera phone as well.
Yes, I do. I mean, I love photography. I don't like the equipment bit. Bores me a bit. You know, how to get there. I know what I want. I mean, I love art. Always have done. Come from a family of people that love anything creative and artists. So of course, yes, I love photography and love looking at photographs. So yeah, I've got a great love of photography. So yes, I'm being mean. It's not true, but I won't really join in the gear chat. But I do like looking at the photos that go up and the pets. People put photos of their pets up. They're lovely.
Yeah, we love that. I was just thinking, while I've been back in the UK, I have actually been doing a few little vlogs, really just for myself and for my family. And most of that will never get published. But there was one that Mum kept saying, oh, you should post this up. And it was the one of Anglesey Abbey. And this is actually using a new camera I'm trying out. So really it was a test to see how well this camera performed. It's your GoPro replacement, I will tell you that much. Oh,
okay. I thought you bought yourself another camera.
Well, I've bought you another camera, I should say.
Okay, all right.
But I just wondered if perhaps people could let us know if they're interested in seeing this. It's literally just 2-3 minutes of the British countryside in full autumnal colours. And it's a nice little piece. And Mum kept saying, well, you should post it up because it features an old stately home in some beautiful gardens. And maybe people would be interested in that side of it. I know it has nothing to do with sailing and very little to do with travel. But perhaps we could pin it on the end of one of our podcasts, because it wouldn't stand alone as an episode.
I think we should wrap this up, because I think we've said as much as we're going to say on the subject at the moment. But no doubt that you'll have lots of comments, and we do want to have some discussion going on in the comments below this video, if you're watching it on video, and over at Discord. So let's talk more. But I think you should put it at the end of this one, because it's been all about photography, and it is a beautiful work of art. I love it. It's great, and it's made me feel quite homesick for the UK, even though it's cold.
Okay, all right. So just going back to doing vlogging and video, travel video, that kind of thing, just to put this little clip we're about to watch in context, this is the DJI Action 4, and it is very similar to a GoPro, but the difference is this camera just works. Because we all know the reason why, what I've been finding, I said to you earlier that I'm miniaturizing more and more our video equipment. What I was finding towards the tail end of our trip, just before I got back here, was that I found I was picking up the GoPro more often than I was my big video camera. And I realized that for the sake of vlogging, which isn't particularly cinematographic, is it? It's just vlogging. We needed a camera that we can both use, that you just turn on and it records when you want it to. Now, the GoPro is notorious for shutting down, corrupting files, overheating, and DJI have this range of cameras which are a direct competition to GoPro. And the latest iteration, the Action 4, everyone has been raving about because it's just such a great little action cam. And I have to say, having edited this little video, you'll see that the colours you can get out of it. So I recorded it in D-Log, which is a flat profile that allows you to colour correct. And that flat profile is really easy to work with in the editing suite. It's a great little camera. So I'm hoping that you're going to enjoy using it.
I'm looking forward to it. So if you're listening to this as a podcast, we'll finish. But if you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to get this added bonus at the end of Jamie's little work of art. Yeah?
Great. All right. That nicely wraps up that. As we said, if you've got any questions, then do head over to Discord and look for that camera chat section. I'm always hovering around in there and always keen to talk about camera gear, which Liz isn't, because it's my passion and I'm a complete nerd when it comes to this kind of thing.
Thanks for watching, everybody, and for listening.
All right, catch you next time. Bye. It's a rather lovely autumnal afternoon. So, what better way to spend an autumnal afternoon in the countryside, going for a walk through many, many beech trees. But this isn't just any old country walk. This is actually one of my parents' favourite spots. It's called Anglesey Abbey, and it's in the county of Cambridgeshire in a village called Lode. The name Anglesey Abbey is a little bit of a misnomer actually, because as you can see, it isn't an abbey. Once upon a time there was an abbey here, way back in the 11th century, but in the 1530s, with the dissolution of the monasteries, if you remember, that was Henry VIII who wanted to get rid of the Catholic religion in the UK in order for him to set up the Church of England so he could marry his 10th wife. They dissolved it, and so in 1600 they built a Jacobean-style private house on the original grounds of the abbey itself. There have been a number of owners of this place, including 3 clergymen, and the last owner of it was Lord Fairhaven, and he lived here until his death in the mid-1960s, when it was handed over to the National Trust. Behind me is Lode's Mill, which sits on the grounds of Anglesey Abbey. Apparently there was a mill here dating back as far as 1040, that's 11th century. But the mill that you see behind us was built in around 1745, 1750. It's gone through many guises. It was originally built to mill coprolite. Coprolite is used as a fertiliser. It is also the official name of fossilised dinosaur poo, apparently. It was then later converted to cement mill, and they used to have little mini cement factories along here. And it wasn't until Lord Fairhaven, who was the last owner of Anglesey Abbey, got rid of all of the cement factories and turned it into a feature of Anglesey Abbey Gardens. Anglesey Abbey is set in 90 acres of land, and while the house itself is of historic interest, the biggest attraction is taking a wander through the grounds. With a vast selection of flora, from manicured walkways lined with colourful shrubs and bushes to the wild woodland areas on the perimeter, it is a botanist's dream. But it's not just a place for adults. Children could spend hours here, encouraged to build their own bivouacs among the copse of ash and hazel, and the National Trust has even set aside an adventure playground that is clearly marked for children only.